very interesting to me to fly in southern waters rather than in the north.
For 89 years, one question has stayed open. Where did the plane go? Now a boat is leaving Tarawa in the first week of October, and 16 people are on it. They are carrying a magnetometer and a dredge. They are going to a tiny atoll almost nobody can reach, and they are going there because of a shape in a lagoon that appeared after a storm in 2014. One expert says it is a downed coconut tree. Another says it deserves a closer look. In October, somebody finally finds out. The Flying Laboratory. A university in Indiana is funding an expedition to the South Pacific for one simple reason. The aircraft belonged to Purdue. That part of the story begins in 1934, inside the Waldorf Astoria in New York. Amelia Earhart was there for a conference, and during that event, she met Edward Elliott, the president of Purdue University. Their meeting led to a formal role. Earhart joined Purdue as a counselor to women students and as an advisor to the university's Young Aeronautical Engineering program. The effect came quickly. In the summer of 1935, before Earhart had even stepped onto the campus, first-year enrollment of women at Purdue rose by 50%. Her name carried weight. Her presence made aviation feel possible to women who had been watching from the outside. Then, Purdue made a far bigger decision. Through the Purdue Research Foundation's Amelia Earhart Fund for Aeronautical Research, the university bought her an airplane. The aircraft was a Lockheed Electra 10E. People described it as a flying laboratory. That phrase mattered. This was meant to be more than a machine for headlines. It was meant to be a research aircraft, a platform for studying human endurance, long-distance navigation, and the limits of flight across the world's loneliest routes. There was also an understanding behind the gift. Earhart planned to return the aircraft to Purdue after the flight. That return never happened. Because of that, the search carries more than historical interest. It carries a legal and emotional weight. The plane at the center of this mystery still belongs, in a meaningful way, to Purdue. The Purdue Research Foundation has never stopped making that point. Nearly 90 years later, the institution that bought the aircraft is sending a boat into the Pacific to look for it. Even Purdue seemed surprised by how much attention the decision received. According to the university's internal figures, the first announcement created the largest single-day earned media response in Purdue's history. It even passed the attention Purdue received for the total solar eclipse of April 2025. On the first day alone, there were 2,740 media placements. The potential reach was estimated at 3.5 billion people. In total, the story drew nearly 5,000 media placements. A university announced that it was going to search for an old airplane. On paper, that announcement reached close to half the planet. We are on the line 157337. The disappearance itself has been studied again and again. In aviation history, few stretches of time have been examined with this much attention. The core facts are clear. On July 2, 1937, Amelia Earhart and her navigator Fred Noonan took off from Lae in New Guinea. Their destination was Howland Island, a tiny strip of coral in the middle of the Pacific. The island was about 2 miles long and half a mile wide. A new airstrip had been built there, but beyond that, there was almost nothing. For any pilot, Howland was a brutal target. The numbers explain why. The island rose no more than about 20 feet above sea level. From the cockpit of an aircraft at altitude, once you were more than a few miles away, it could vanish into the ocean. Earhart and Noonan were trying to reach it after flying more than 2,500 miles. They had no radar. They had no satellite navigation. Their radio direction finding was unreliable. Their tools were dead reckoning, and celestial fixes taken with a sextant. On a flight that long, a small error could become fatal. The United States Coast Guard cutter Itasca was waiting near Howland. Its job was to guide them in by radio. Over the next few hours, the messages from Earhart became more alarming. She and Noonan were near the island, but they could not see it. Their fuel was running low. Their radio bearings were failing for reasons that people have argued about for almost 9 decades. One detail still makes the story feel unbearable. The Itasca could hear Earhart clearly. Her signal was strong. At certain moments, it was strong enough that the crew believed she had to be almost overhead. Earhart could not hear them. Researchers have picked apart the radio problem for decades. The most likely explanation appears to involve several issues working together. There were frequency mismatches. The aircraft's trailing wire antenna may have been lost or not used. Earhart may also have been unfamiliar with the direction-finding equipment. The exact cause remains debated, but the result was painfully clear. A ship had been placed near Howland for the exact purpose of guiding Earhart in. The crew heard her calling for help. They could not get an answer back to her. Then came the final message. At 8:43 in the morning, local time, Earhart said they were on the line 157337. That phrase was not random. It referred to a compass heading and its reciprocal. In navigation, it was a line of position, calculated from a sun sighting. It ran northwest to southeast across the ocean. This was a normal method for the period. A single sun sighting could not give a full position, but it could show that the aircraft was somewhere along a line. From there, a pilot could fly along that line and hope to find land. Northwest of Howland, along that line, there was open ocean. Southeast of Howland, roughly 350 nautical miles away, there was an uninhabited atoll, then called Gardner Island. That distance matters because the Electra may have been able to cover it with the fuel it had left. Gardner Island is now called Nikumaroro. It is uninhabited today, and it has been uninhabited since the colony there was abandoned in 1963. The search that looked and left. The most maddening part of the story happened within a week. After Earhart disappeared, the United States Navy launched what was then the largest and most expensive air and sea search in American history. 9 ships and many aircraft searched an area of roughly 250,000 square miles. Then, on July 9, 1937, 7 days after the aircraft vanished, planes from the USS Colorado flew over Gardner Island. The pilots saw signs of recent habitation. They did not see an aircraft. Nobody on the ground signaled them. Because of that, they concluded the island was uninhabited and moved on. No search party landed. At the time, that decision made sense. Gardner had been settled and abandoned before. Cleared vegetation and old structures could easily have belonged to that earlier history. From the air, those signs did not necessarily prove that 2 castaways had been there for a week, yet the possibility remains devastating. Under the Nikumaroro theory, American naval aviators flew over Amelia Earhart on July 9, 1937. They looked down, saw evidence that someone had been living there, decided it was old, and left. That is the painful center of this case. It is also the reason people keep going back. Still, the pilots deserve fairness. They were not sitting in a quiet office with maps and decades of hindsight. They were flying a float plane launched by catapult from a battleship. Below them was an island covered in thick scrub. Their time over the island was limited. A huge amount of ocean still needed to be searched. They were looking for an aircraft. From the air, a Lockheed Electra on a reef flat, in the surf, or partly hidden by trees, would not have been easy to spot. There is another possibility too. Earhart and Noonan may have been sheltering from the sun in the vegetation. In that case, they may not have heard the aircraft soon enough to reach open ground. A whole version of that morning depends on 90 seconds. The bones of 1940. 3 years later, the story became even stranger. In 1940, the British colonial administration was setting up a settlement on Gardner Island. The officer in charge was Gerald Gallagher. Near the southeastern end of the island, he found part of a human skeleton. The objects found with it are the reason this discovery still matters. There was a sextant box. There was a woman's shoe. According to colonial correspondence, there were other signs that suggested a castaway rather than a normal burial. Gallagher understood the importance of what he might have found. The bones were sent to Fiji. In 1941, Dr. David Hoodless, the principal of the Central Medical School in Suva, examined them. He took 7 measurements and concluded that the remains were male. Then, the bones were lost. They have never been found again. Because of that, DNA testing is impossible. That could have ended the matter, but the paperwork survived. In 1997, historian Peter Macquarie found the colonial correspondence in the Kiribati National Archives. More material later appeared in the Western Pacific High Commission files in England. This gave modern forensic anthropologists a narrow opening. They could not examine the bones, but they could examine Hoodless's measurements. In 1998, Karen Burns and Richard Jantz concluded that the remains may very likely have belonged to Earhart. In 2015, Pamela Cross and Richard Wright published a paper defending Hoodless and rejecting that conclusion. Then, in 2018, Richard Jantz of the University of Tennessee published a new analysis in the journal Forensic Anthropology. He applied modern quantitative methods to the old measurements and reached the finding that has followed the case ever since. According to Jantz, the bones showed more similarity to Earhart than to 99% of individuals in a large reference sample. The most important part of his argument was not that Hoodless had been careless. Hoodless was working in 1941, and forensic osteology was still limited. The methods available to him were not strong enough for the question he was trying to answer, especially when determining sex from partial remains. Jantz's analysis did not prove that the bones were Amelia Earhart. It showed that the old reason for ruling her out was unreliable. It also showed that the most important physical evidence in the case had been lost before anyone could test it properly. That loss still feels astonishing. A partial skeleton was found on a specific island. It was found with a sextant box and a woman's shoe. The discovery happened 3 years after a woman disappeared while flying toward that island with a navigator who carried a sextant. The bones went to Fiji. They were measured 7 times. Then they disappeared. Had those bones survived into the 1990s, a DNA test against Earhart's surviving maternal relatives could have answered the biggest question in the case. Decades of expeditions may never have been needed. The sailors from the Norwich City. A fair account has to include the strongest counter-argument, and this one is serious. In 1929, a British steamer called the Norwich City ran aground on the reef at the northwest end of Gardner Island. It caught fire. 11 men died. 8 crew members were never found. Kenton Spading gathered the available information on those missing sailors and published it. His argument is simple. Human remains were already connected to that island before Earhart disappeared. Because of that, bones found there in 1940 could have another explanation. Spading found height records for 5 of the 8 missing sailors. 4 were unlikely matches for the castaway based on the available measurements. Each appeared either too short or too tall, although none could be ruled out with total certainty. The 5th man, a seaman named Saleh Rageh, was listed at 5 feet 6 inches. There is another problem, and researchers on both sides have acknowledged it. Nikumaroro was inhabited as a colony from 1938 to 1963. Many people were buried there during that period. Over time, erosion has exposed graves. Because of that, human remains reported on the island after about 1940 are more likely to come from colonial burials than from anything connected to Earhart's 1937 disappearance. That leaves the physical evidence in a difficult place. There are measurements taken in 1941 by a doctor using limited methods. The bones no longer exist. The island had deaths before Earhart disappeared and burials after she vanished. The skeptical case also has a strong foundation because the conventional explanation is direct. Earhart and Noonan flew toward a tiny target they could not find. Their fuel ran out over open ocean. Their aircraft went into the Pacific. That was the conclusion reached by the United States Navy in 1937. Many aviation historians have accepted it since then. It does not require a castaway camp, missed distress calls, or unusual timing. The Pacific is huge. It is deep. Aircraft that go down there often vanish completely. There is even a separate search effort focused on the deep seabed near Howland, based on that exact idea. The Nikumaroro theory draws people in because it feels close enough to touch. It gives the story an island, a reef, bones, a shoe, a sextant box, and one awful chance that rescuers may have passed overhead. That is why the case still lives. Some mysteries fade because time takes their shape away. This one keeps its shape because every clue seems to lead to another door. The Seven Site. What TIJAR, the International Group for Historic Aircraft Recovery, has done with the Nikumaroro theory is something far more patient than speculation. It has spent 37 years doing archaeology. Rick Gillespie first went to Nikumaroro in 1989. Since then, he has led or helped coordinate around a dozen expeditions to the island. Most of that work has focused on a place at the southeastern end of Nikumaroro known as the Seven Site. That location matters because the available evidence points to it as the place where the bones were found. The material recovered there does not give one clean answer. There is no single object that settles the case. Instead, there is a pattern. Thomas King explained the logic in a useful way. For the hypothesis to fail, a whole chain of coincidences would have to line up at the same time. Someone camped at that site. That person caught, cooked, and ate fish. They opened clams in a way that did not fit the known habits of indigenous Pacific Islanders. Someone set bottles upright in a campfire. Someone left American-made cosmetic bottles behind. Someone also happened to match Earhart in stature, sex, and ethnicity, unless the later analysis of Hoodless's measurements by Burns and Jantz was simply wrong. That is why the Seven Site keeps pulling researchers back. At the same time, the site has problems, real problems. TIJAR has never hidden them. The area was disturbed again and again across the decades. British colonists logged hardwood there and cleared land for coconut planting in 1940 and 1941. Then, in the middle of the 1940s, American Coast Guardsmen from the island's Loran station appear to have hunted birds and carried out target practice in the same area. That kind of disturbance makes archaeology harder. It muddies the story. Every single artifact from the Seven Site has been challenged. Every bottle, every bone measurement, every object has been debated. Yet when the pieces are placed together, they seem to describe an American castaway presence on an uninhabited Pacific island before the British settlers arrived. The critics have a serious reply to that. Their point deserves space. A pattern made from weak items can still be weak. It can also become a set of unclear clues arranged in the direction a researcher already wanted to go. Nikumaroro was visited by ships. It had colonists, it had coast guardsmen, it had survivors from a wreck. American-made objects on a Pacific island in the middle of the 20th century are not strange by themselves. Both sides include serious people. Neither side can settle the matter through argument alone. That is why someone is getting on a boat. A downed coconut tree. So why is a new expedition, led by different people, going to search the lagoon instead of returning to the Seven Site? Because the Tarawa object is a separate claim. That object appears in satellite images from 2015 onward. It sits in the lagoon, and it seems to have been uncovered or shifted by a major tropical storm the year before. Pettigrew's team studied the images alongside the documentary record and the photographic evidence. After that, they decided the object deserved direct physical inspection. Rick Gillespie sees it differently. Gillespie believes Earhart died on Nikumaroro. He has spent nearly 4 decades trying to prove it. He has stood on that beach more times than anyone alive. Yet when he spoke to NBC's Tom Costello on Today, he said the object in the satellite image was a downed coconut tree. That disagreement matters. It also makes sense. 2 experienced investigators are looking at low-resolution satellite images of shallow tropical water. They are reading the same unclear shape and reaching different conclusions. That is exactly the kind of thing low-resolution imagery can create. Still, one detail should make everyone pause. The object has been visible for more than a decade. It is not a brand new discovery. It has been sitting there in archive imagery since 2015. Whatever it is, it has been there long enough for someone to go and look. The reason no one has done that yet is also the reason this expedition took a year to move forward. Nikumaroro is extremely remote. It also sits inside the Phoenix Islands Protected Area, one of the largest marine protected areas on the planet. The island belongs to Kiribati. Anyone who wants to dredge a lagoon there needs permission from a sovereign government at several levels. That is what delayed the original November 2025 launch. Steve Schultz, Purdue's senior vice president and general counsel, is also a member of the expedition. Afterward, he described the process in careful terms. Maritime expeditions require deep preparation and many clearances. This one needed approvals from multiple levels of the Kiribati government. Kiribati representatives are part of the 16-person team heading out in October. That is the proper arrangement, and it was almost certainly part of the permission process. In October, someone will finally look. Magnetometer, sonar, dredge. The plan is more serious than many people assume when they hear the words treasure hunt. That matters because the method will shape the meaning of any result. The expedition has 2 phases. The first phase is remote sensing. The team will run a magnetometer survey to detect ferrous metal beneath the sediment. Then, they will use side-scan sonar to map the shape of anything resting on the lagoon floor. After that, a sub-bottom profiler will send acoustic energy into the sediment to show what lies underneath, rather than only what sits on the surface. Together, those tools should reveal whether metal is present and what shape the buried object may have. Only then does the second phase begin. That phase is target identification. The team will establish a 50-meter baseline. They will use a hydroprobe to test how deeply the object is buried. Then they will dredge. Everything recovered will be recorded. Exposed features will be documented. The site will be photographed and filmed. Every bag of dredged sediment will be brought to the surface, screened, and examined instead of being dumped away. That is the line between archaeology and salvage. The difference matters more than it may sound. Screening sediment is slow. It costs money. It is tiring work, yet it exists for one reason. Small things often identify big stories. A certain kind of rivet, a fragment of a particular alloy, a manufacturer's stamp. A Lockheed Electra 10E has a known specification. If aluminium alloy from the right period and composition comes out of the lagoon, it can be tested against that specification. The team does not need to find a whole aeroplane. One piece may be enough, but only if that piece can be tied to Earhart's aircraft. The original plan had the team leaving Majuro in the Marshall Islands on the 4th of November 2025. They expected to spend 5 days on the island and return on the 21st. That launch was postponed on the 27th of October 2025 while Kiribati permits were being completed. The South Pacific cyclone season also closed the weather window. The revised departure is now set for Tarawa in the first week of October 2026. If the first expedition confirms the identity of the aircraft, Purdue and the Archaeological Legacy Institute have said they will return for larger excavation work. The goal would be to recover and repatriate what remains. Everything, okay? So what happens in October? There are three possible outcomes. The object may be a coconut tree, a rock, or a piece of the Norwich city. If that happens, Rick Gillespie was right, and the Tarawa hypothesis ends after 5 days of survey work. That is the most likely outcome by any reasonable reading of the odds. The people running the expedition know that. The object may also turn out to be metal, but without a clear identity. It could be a fragment too corroded to read, with no certain origin. That would be the hardest outcome because it would keep the argument alive for years. Then there is the third possibility. The magnetometer may register something shaped like an aircraft. The sonar may return a profile that fits a Lockheed Electra 10E. If that happens, one of the world's longest-lasting missing person cases ends in a lagoon in Kiribati after 89 years. There is something else that needs to be said, because the mystery often swallows the person at the center of it. Amelia Earhart was a serious aviator. She was the first woman to fly solo across the Atlantic in May 1932, 5 years after Lindbergh. She made that 15-hour crossing in a single-engine Lockheed Vega, while dealing with icing, a cracked manifold, and a fuel leak. She completed the flight by landing in a field in Northern Ireland. In 1935, she became the first person of either sex to fly solo from Hawaii to California. That flight was longer and more dangerous over water than the Atlantic crossing. She set records for altitude, speed, and distance. In the summer of 1935, she helped inspire a 50% rise in women's enrollment at an American engineering university before she had even appeared on the campus. She was 39 years old when the aircraft went down. She was on the second-to-last leg of the longest circumnavigation route anyone had attempted. The route covered around 22,000 miles and followed the equator. By then, she had completed roughly 2/3 of it. Then came the last transmissions from the cockpit. Before the line of position, before the fuel ran out, everything was okay. She was 350 miles from an island with a shipwreck on the reef and almost no fresh water. She was on a line she had calculated correctly. Beside her was a navigator who could not find a target 2 miles wide in an ocean that seemed endless. If the hypothesis is right, she reached Nikumaroro. If the hypothesis is right, she landed on the reef flat at low tide. She and Noonan lived for some time as castaways. American aircraft flew over the island on the 9th of July and kept going. None of that has ever been proved. The whole theory may still be wrong. But in the first week of October, 16 people are getting on a boat in Tarawa with a magnetometer and a dredge. They are sailing to an uninhabited atoll to examine a shape that appeared in a lagoon after a storm in 2014. For the first time in 89 years, someone is going there with the equipment, the permission, and the specific purpose of answering that question. The aircraft, if it is there, belongs to a university in Indiana. Purdue bought it in 1936. In a strange way, the university has been waiting for it to come back ever since. There is one final piece to this story, and it reaches beyond the headline. Amelia Earhart has been missing for 89 years. Across most of that time, her disappearance has turned her into a vessel for theories. Stories about Japanese capture. Stories about a secret life under another name in New Jersey. Stories shaped by every kind of 20th century nonsense that could gather around a famous woman who vanished. Finding the aircraft would end those stories. It would also give the families something different. Families of missing people understand this better than anyone. A discovery can turn an open wound into a known history. Relatives still remain. Surviving letters still exist. Purdue still has the memory of a loan that began in 1937 and was never returned. And then there is the medicine vial. It was recovered from the island. It dates to the 1930s. It carries the name of a pharmacy from Toluca Lake in California, the place where Amelia Earhart lived. That vial proves nothing by itself. Nothing on the island proves anything by itself. That has been the problem for 4 decades. In the first week of October, a boat leaves Tarawa to find out whether the thing in the lagoon does.